Thanks for coming, Amanda. So we are super excited to have you just chat about sexual health and hormones, because we know that's your specialty. So why don't you just give a little intro about yourself, kind of who you are, what your passions are, and then your spirit animal.
Okay. So I'm Amanda Selmser. I'm a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine, which means that I work with Chinese herbs and supplements and create my treatment plans that way. And I am also a registered acupuncturist. So I've been working here in town at West Valley Chiropractic for over a year now. And I've been working in women's health and in the acupuncture world for almost a decade now. So it's been something that I've been super passionate about since I was a young girl. And since I first started to experience health issues. I had asthmatic issues when I was quite young, and we always turned to naturopathic medicine, herbs, supplements, diet therapy for that kind of treatment in my family. And then as I got older, it was other things. It was digestive issues, it was stress and anxiety and all those things that go with being a teenager. And then it was hormones. And I lived in a house with just women. And it was a bit of a cat fight once a month where we all sort of marked where we were at in our cycles, because we all synced up and had these moments of discomfort hormonally every month. And that was always really interesting to me. It was when we were in high school and studying all kinds of different subjects, and that's when biology really started to pique my interest. I wanted to know why I feel this way, why I don't feel good in my own skin right now, why I feel irritable and certain things are bothering me, and what I could do about it. And so my head was kind of asking those questions from a young age. I think it was a little bit about family background, just growing up with a mother and grandmother that looked alternatively before they looked conventionally.
It's very cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, so a bit of a root there with women in medicine. But again, I would always look to the mechanics in our school and think, your passion about trying to figure out that car is the exact same passion I have about trying to figure out my body. So I remember in grade 12 just studying regular biology and not thinking that it was enough. It wasn't giving me the answers that I wanted to about what was going on in my system and why it was happening. So there began my journey to women's health and hormones specifically. It's not just about figuring it out for other people, but a big part of it has been figuring it out for myself. Yeah. Cool. And my spirit animal, when I really think about it, is probably a horse.
Nice.
Yeah,
Why?
and like the power behind a horse.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just loved riding horses when I was younger, and if I could have a farm and a couple of horses. So I don't know if that's my spirit animal, but that's the animal I resonate with the most.
Nice. That's awesome. So do you want to jump up with some of your...
Yeah, well, one question that I have, like as soon as you hear like we're going to talk to a hormone doctor, my favorite question is the pill. What are your thoughts on birth control? I'm not there yet for my children, but I just think for me as a kid, I didn't do it. I was on the birth control for maybe 2 years, I think, kind of like maybe like 18 to 20. And then for me, I don't know why I did it. Well, actually, you know what it was? I was in nursing school. I started to kind of learn some different things, and I thought, I don't think this is what I want to be doing. But there wasn't like a bigger story than that. It was just kind of like intuitively, I'm like, ooh, I don't want to do this. And so I veered away from birth control. But I hear so often, right? There's older women on birth control still who are using it to treat like acne or different PMS symptoms or things like that. And then also women who are now putting their teenage daughters on birth control. So I'm just curious as to, what's like, how do you educate your patients on birth control and just the alternatives and options out there?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
What it does to your whole system.
Yeah, it's essentially it's feeding hormones into your body that wouldn't naturally be there. And it really, outside of being used as a contraceptive, it is being used to treat women's gynecological issues. So if you have a heavier flowing, painful cycle, take the pill. If you have cystic acne or bad skin, take the pill. If you have brutal cramping and excruciating pain, take the pill. Irregular cycles. So instead of going into your doctor and having a discussion about potentially what is happening to your hormones and why you're having those types of symptoms, you're given this pill. And it's a pill that's taken to kind of mask what's naturally going on and imbalanced in our bodies. So that's the reason that I don't love using it as a therapy, because it's not treating the root cause of what the imbalance is. So we may see that our skin clears, we may see that our cycles regulate themselves, but at the end of the day, it's not our body that's actually doing that work. So years and years and years later, because that's how long the doctors will advise us to be taking the pill, we might note that either our symptoms come back or we don't feel well and something needs to change, or we educate ourselves on the dangers of being on the risk long-term use, and that question comes to the back of our head: is this something that I should still be on years and years and years later without really staying in contact and in touch with my caretakers? The other thing that I think is really interesting about using the pill is how it kind of takes away the power of conversation around our reproductive health. So especially for young teenage girls, instead of teaching them about their menstrual cycle and teaching them the power of, ovulation and menstruation and knowing what your body's doing and knowing when your body's doing that, we're using these pills, and it's masking and taking away our knowledge of our reproductive system. So it's really taking away our power to learn more about our bodies. So young girls are using it without proper instruction of how it is affecting their bodies, how it may be affecting their bodies long term. But I think that's, if we could move forward and think more about educating each other and our younger generation on the power of knowledge when it comes to our menstruation and our cycle and our hormones, it hopefully is looked at as a less and less effective way of treating some of these conditions.
Mm-hmm. I know, man, okay. What about, so on our Simply Awaken reset, we've had a ton of older women who are in they're going through menopause, and they've, had symptoms where like they're up all night, hot flashes are so intense that like it's super embarrassing, so like a lack of confidence and stuff, and then they're doing this reset, reducing inflammation and literally like clearing up those symptoms. Can you talk a little bit about like hormonal shifts around menopause, and then like some things that we can do to support that time?
Yeah, I think that that menopause is really interesting because it potentially happens when we are at a higher level of stress in our life. So we've been in the working world for a really long time. We've raised children from young until old. By then, a lot of people have been through divorce. There's been traumas in their lives, and it's a time of life when I think that the way in which we've lived really starts to catch up to us. And I don't even think that, is menopause now. I think it's happening to us at a younger and younger age than it used to. But it really makes us take a step back and look at all the ways that stress has affected our bodies. And when it comes to our hormones and menopause, there's a pretty big transition, and our bodies have a really big way of saying, I've been under a whole lot of stress, I've been eating the wrong foods, I haven't been sleeping properly. And so this transition into menopause, which could be a relatively mild and easy transition, is quite horrific for some women because it's a hormonal shift that happens when our bodies have potentially been under huge amounts of distress for many, many years, if not decades. So seeing women commit to these kinds of programs and being educated on the fact that our hormones don't have to feel like that when we transition into our menstrual cycles, into our fertile years, into our pregnancies, into our menopause. Our bodies don't have to feel the way that potentially the media, potentially some of our conventional doctors have made us feel is a normal way to experience these changes. So I think that it's, education and empowering people to take charge and look into people who can facilitate a program or people who can help guide them in their healing journeys with diet, with nutrition, with lifestyle, stress management, sleeping patterns and sleeping behavior changes, all of that.
So, like, we were a little bit shocked at that because we didn't really, like, that wasn't something that was on our mind when we did the program. I was like, oh, this would help with menopause. And it was consistently. So can you break that down a little bit? Like, why, like, the inflammation would have such an impact on?
Well, inflammation and even toxin buildup as well.
Right.
So often when I have my clients start protocols for mental health, anxiety, insomnia, just managing their stress levels, on top of those things being treated, it's often really nice changes that are made to our hormones as well. So when we take out toxins from our diet that really mimic and mess up with our estrogen levels and our other hormone levels, and we take out foods that are causing stress to our system and causing inflammation, it gives our body a chance to naturally balance out. So we're removing these things from our system that are wreaking havoc, and our natural hormones can start to take their regular rhythm.
Right.
So without even meaning to, treat these hormonal issues by addressing triggers such as stress, inflammation, toxin levels, and even just mental health load. So taking away from stress levels can be huge for just allowing our bodies to naturally come to a place where our hormones cycle the way that they should.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the environmental factors that are like some of like the worst culprits on like our hormones, would you say?
I feel like I'm saying stress a lot.
Yeah, but it's
so huge. And stress affects it affects our adrenals, it affects our whole endocrine system, it affects the way that we sleep, and so we aren't healing at night the way that we should be. So stress is, you just can't talk about it enough how important it is to find ways to manage it when we're young, so that by the time we are older, it hasn't built up to be some kind of disease in our system. But also the way in which we eat as well. I think, and every body is different. I don't know if there's a one diet fits all, but I do believe that there are a lot of things that can cause some pretty serious damage to people with specific intolerances and sensitivities. So removing wheats, removing sugars, removing refined oils can be a really big step in the right direction. And a lot of those food products have toxins in them. They're not just whole, healthy foods. So toxins are one of the biggest things that our hormones are affected by, our stress levels and everything that comes with stress. Increased anxiety, not sleeping well, not healing because we are not in that rest and digest state. Yeah. It's a bit of a, there's just so many things that fuel the fire when it comes to hormone health. And so it's not a, there's not a pill to fix it.
Yeah.
There isn't just one thing we can take to change our entire endocrine system. There's little baby steps, and I think that we have to really be inspired to want to change things overall, because it takes food changes, it takes lifestyle changes, it takes herbs and supplements and specialization in treatment plans, but once you start the journey, it's empowering and it feels good, and your energy levels go up, you sleep better, your libido increases. It's worth its weight in gold, looking into our hormones and looking into what is playing a role in their deficiencies and their imbalances.
That's why I think it's so important to start the conversation at as young as we can, because the norm, right, that we have, we think as we age, this is going to happen, right? As I get older, or menopause will be like this. So we already have these ideas around how terrible these experiences are going to be, or even starting really young and thinking when I get my period, that's going to be awful. But really opening up the conversation to speak to our young girls about what normal can be, what healthy looks like, how
Yes.
we actually can age gracefully when we're taking care of ourselves. And I think like that's the conversation we need to be having more. And it actually makes me think of too when I was pregnant with my son, and women would come to me, and I don't know if I was calling them in or what it was, but they would have the most horrible stories to tell me. So here I am, this like 9-month pregnant woman, I'm
Jeez.
ready to give
Last
birth,
thing you wanna hear.
and they'd be like, oh, let me tell you my story.
Yes.
And so then we do that to our younger generations, and then you kind of, go in thinking, oh my God, this is going to be a really bad situation,
Yeah.
right? Or this experience of menopause is going to be terrible because that's the conversations that we're hearing, right?
Yeah.
So I think, to bring it back to like, no, when we are honoring our bodies, when we are taking good care of ourselves, we can have beautiful deliveries. We can have orgasmic deliveries, right? Like that's a thing.
That's a thing.
That is a thing.
Yeah.
And we can move into menopause gracefully, and I think.
And part of that too is like the norms around that. Like I think about like, like people I know who've gone through menopause, and it's like, oh, like stay away, like they're having a hot flash, or they're having like a freak out, like like stay away, or like that PMS. Oh, are you PMSing? And it just like is this negative, always this negative connotation around that, where it's like, no, like things are happening in me as well, right? This is natural, and I mean it doesn't have to be so extreme. That's a big part of it, but also just like we're so scared of it, and so I think that just makes it that much harder for us to
I think there's a big disconnect. There has been a big disconnect in women and their bodies as our communities have grown apart. So women's menstrual cycles used to be celebrated, and their fertile days used to be celebrated and talked about within the community and within the women and the elders. And that's not something we do anymore. We
power through.
And I think that these stories that we tell to other people, these horror stories about how horrific my cramps are, and a menses is the worst thing you'll ever experience, how horrible my hot flashes are, my grandparents had the worst menopause, I'm going to as well. Delivering babies is excruciating, and it's women's way of healing, and it's women's way of saying, I need somewhere to turn to talk to about these things. I need to heal. And so when we can have these conversations about healing, that's hopefully when we can kind of flip the switch and going from hurting into a place of healing, and in that place of healing we'll be empowering and educating hopefully our future generations and the younger girls who should be taught that a menstrual cycle isn't the worst thing in the world. And it doesn't mean you can't play sports, and it doesn't mean you can't be creative, and it doesn't mean you can't be sexual. It's quite the opposite. When you learn to sync up with your cycle, when you learn to pay attention to it, you realize how much power and wisdom there is in it. And it's really quite fascinating because our cycles are more or less divided hormonally into 4 different sections. So within a month's cycle, a woman's body is transitioning through these 4 different phases, and within each phase we have the ability to feel so many different things, like creative and empowered, or quiet and internal, reflective. So I think these are really interesting conversations that we can start to have with our younger generation, and when they come to us and say, that was really painful, or I'm really embarrassed, or this happened to me, instead of going to the doctor and getting this pill that basically turns off the conversation we should be having with our body, to start talking about reproductive circulation and herbs and supplements that can be really supportive from a young age and really safe, and food and nutrition and yoga and meditation and stress management. So I think, and I hope, and I'm so passionate about it, and this is why I do what I do, so that we can change the future and make it about women empowerment and bringing our voices forward. It's not just our hormones, it's our bodies, and it's our language.
It's beautiful.
Wouldn't it be incredible if that was part of like the school curriculum of like let's learn the phases of our cycle, right?
Like health class actually being a health class, and not
like
like a time to like giggle.
Yeah,
And, yeah.
right. Yeah, but just to be able to say, like, how incredible would that conversation be if that was part of what we're all learning. I had a really interesting conversation earlier this week. A young girl had come in and she was talking about how worried she was because she just got married, she just got off the pill, and they've been trying for a month and she's not pregnant yet. And I was like, oh honey, right, like we gotta slow down. And she's like, I'm stressed and I'm just worried that, like, and I'm like, whoa like, yeah. So just again bringing that conversation back too, right, where it's like we literally only have, what is it, 2 days in a month where you can actually get pregnant.
Yeah, 2 to 7 days.
Yeah, like it's not a huge window, right? But we have these ideas like, oh, I need to be on the pill so I don't get pregnant. But what if we learned that cycle? What if we learned those days and we knew, hey, if I don't have sex on these, days or at this particular time, I won't get pregnant, and use that versus the pill, right? Like how empowering would that be? Like I grew up in a house where it was like, if you have sex, you will get pregnant.
Yeah,
right?
You will die.
Right, well, yeah, I guess it depends. Yes. Yeah. But that's the messaging, right? Where it's like, holy crap, if I have sex, I'm going to get pregnant. So that's scary, where it's like, that's not how it works. And then on the flip side of that, we're trying to get pregnant and you're like, well, shit, I'm having all this sex and I'm not getting pregnant. What's wrong with that?
And then you're stressed, and then stress adds to the whole problem.
Yes. Yeah. So, it's interesting.
There's been it's a whole world of fear, I think, that's been instilled in us when it comes to our hormonal health.
Yes.
Right from the start, right to the end. So, to be there to support each other and make the transitions into a menstrual cycle, into becoming fertile, into menopause. Yeah, I think it's a really special thing to be able to do.
Yeah. Well, celebration, right? Like turning everything into a celebration, I think would be incredible. There's actually these really neat kits where it's like your first period kit.
Yeah.
And I just think like, I mean, for me, my, like, getting my first period was a little bit traumatizing of an experience for me. And I don't want that to be my daughter's experience. Like, I really want it to be a celebration and like a coming together of like all the wise women that I know in the community to like welcome her into womanhood. And like, I've heard different, kind of stories about like period parties. Yeah. And I just think how, like, that's so great. Just that celebration. Or like, hey, I had my last period. Let's have a party, right? I am no longer menstruating.
Probably a bigger thing to celebrate, right? Than at the beginning. But, and also a really fascinating thing to bring into your relationships as a conversation. Like it's something that both parties should be aware of, especially when it does come to menopausal health. So I'm not feeling my best self. I'm not feeling as sexual as I potentially used to be. I feel heavier than I once was. I'm foggy in the head. How can we be there to support each other? So I'm going through something that's really big and potentially you aren't. So there's a huge conversation that needs to be had there when it comes to relationships. And I think that women often feel pressured to continue to feel sexual and continue to feel energetic. And maybe it's a time for more rest and more silence and more inward reflection as opposed to pleasing the people around us.
Right, yeah. Well, even the cycles of like womanhood, right? I'm gonna butcher them, but there's like the maiden, and it keeps going
to crone. I know,
right. Well,
in the middle
but
as
there's
well.
so those transitions, right? Where
when you transition into your menstrual cycle and into becoming a mother and into becoming like a grandmother, elder. They are called.
I don't know. I'm at a loss. But the other thought I had while you were talking too, and maybe if you can touch on this, is men go through menopause as well, right? Men have andropause. It happens to boys too, right? But we don't talk about that part too, which is interesting to me. But yeah, what is andropause? How would you describe that?
Well, just as a woman's testosterone and estrogen levels are coming down, so are a man's. We all have the same hormones. We just have more and less of specific ones. So as men are entering into their 50s, 60s, their testosterone levels are changing as well. So when it comes to sexual health within that age group, I think that I don't know, I'm not there yet, and I don't feel completely experienced in that kind of relationship aspect, but I think that it's something that the two parties should be supportive of each other in, and acknowledging that it is a natural shift, and there's, there isn't a special remedy for bringing all those levels back up. It's a time for change, and it's a time for new roles in the relationship and new roles in life. We become, just like when we have children, we become different people.
Yes.
So our menopausal years for both men and women are transition times in life, where what once was may no longer be, but it doesn't have to be scary. It can be peaceful and calming, and a time in life where maybe rest is more important than running triathlons and starting new businesses. But we have to listen to the language of our body when we're tired. We have to understand that that is there for a reason, and kind of honor that more than our society would allow us to do. We can't exactly take a pause when we hit our menopausal ages. Both men and women. We can't just retire at the, minute our cycles stop. But I think that we can make some lifestyle changes alone, within a relationship, by yourself, together, with more education and more empowerment.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit around, let's get to the hot, sexy topic of libido and sex drive, and I know I think that's it's a question on everyone's kind of mind, is how do what's normal, because a lot of people in my world be oh, I have such a high sex drive, or it's I have no sex drive, and what's happening there, and if there's any way to help that, or support that in a way where
and I think as we're talking about cycles, I think it's really important to know when in our cycles we potentially are going to have that desire, and our libido is going to skyrocket and be there and feel really good. So
what cycle is that?
So right around ovulation. So midway through our cycle is when,
of course,
which makes sense, when we're at our most fertile
we're animals.
phase. So I think that paying attention to our cycles and knowing where we're at, and kind of mapping our flow with the way that we feel physically and emotionally is really important. But I think that it's also really important to note that if we aren't feeling sexual, and if our libido isn't there, then there is a really big underlying deficiency. When we are young, that's something that we should be able to feel every month. We should have that desire, and we should want to make babies at least once a month. And for those of us who don't have that desire, it's likely because we've been burdened with huge amounts of stress, or our body's fatigued, or we're not sleeping properly, or we're fueling ourselves with the wrong ingredients. And there can be some really simple fixes to that, even as we age, with just progesterone support as we are entering into menopause. But herbs and acupuncture and lifestyle changes when we're younger as well, for both men and women. I think that for women, when it comes to being fertile, there is a lot of stress there, and that can decrease libido for sure. Just the pressures of childbearing years, or the scares and stresses of getting pregnant and not wanting that. And then I think for men, there's anxieties around low drive and performance, and so there's lots of things to be celebrated. And when we aren't feeling that way, there are definite imbalances that we should be addressing, we should be looking into, and it's not something that should be embarrassing. It's something that we should want to be looking at and fixing, because every month we should get that spike in hormones where we feel more primal, and we feel more excitable, and we feel that libido.
What's do you have a go-to, we're talking aphrodisiacs in our newsletter, do you have any kind of special potions quick fix.
We might all need something a little tiny bit different.
Yeah.
But I think clean eating is huge.
Yeah.
And I also think exploring the world of adaptogenic herbs is really interesting.
Yeah.
So adaptogenics, when it comes to sort of a one fix all herbal magic supplement, adaptogenic herbs are kind of the new.
I always think of maca. Comes to
Maca's
mind, always.
huge.
Yeah.
I have a goddess blend of all kinds of different warrior mushrooms. But adaptogenic herbs, they adapt to the body that they're in. So they're herbs with brains. So basically,
I love that, herbs with brains.
yeah, they go into our cells and they go into our bodies and they say, oh, you're a little deficient here. Oh, you're a little excess there. And they fix what needs to be fixed, whatever the condition is and however it's, whatever the root cause is. An adaptogenic herb works a little bit differently than something like an echinacea or, so they're a powerful world of mushrooms, antioxidants, herbs to be considering.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. One last question that's on my mind is because we have like another program that is coming out and there's like a HIIT component to it, so like heavy weights, pretty like strenuous exercise for short amounts of time, and then like a diet change and stuff like that too. But we acknowledge, like we're trying to be as supportive as we possibly can, because we get that there is adrenal fatigue and that high amounts of exercise compounded with stress in your life already is going to lead to can really be harmful. So can you just talk about like what's happening there when you're compounding stress, and then what's happening like with adrenal fatigue and stuff like that?
Yeah. So it's kind of like adding a really intensive workout onto somebody who has no energy left in their battery. So we're just draining somebody further and further and further. So before we get into those kinds of activity levels, I think it's really important that we take some time to build up that reservoir of energy. So our energy levels really being affected by our thyroid function. We no longer even call it adrenal fatigue. We call it hypothyroidism.
Thyroidism? No, sorry.
Delete that. Hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction.
Oh, HPA. Okay.
Yes,
Gotcha. Yeah.
but I can't. I screw it up every time. So it's not just our adrenals that are fatigued; it's our whole pituitary adrenal hypothalamic system. So it's really important to build that up before we take on really extensive activities, workout plans, because the damage is in those healthy stressors that in an unhealthy energy body, that healthy stressor becomes too much and it just takes away at an already fatigued system. So if we are in this place of fatigue and we are in an HPA axis dysfunction, we just need to take the time to build it back up and bring it back to balance. It's not somewhere that we need to be forever, or we're going to be forever, but some really big changes to our levels of stress need to be addressed before we take on anything else that can potentially drain an already stressed system.
I mean, so see it often where people are like, I'm gaining weight, but I'm working out constantly, and it's like, that makes sense.
So our cortisol levels, those stress hormones, they just go through the roof when our bodies aren't ready to take on another healthy stressor. So even fasting for a normal healthy person is something that can have incredibly great results. But for that person that may have blood sugar insufficiencies or even hypothyroidism, HPA axis dysfunction, it can be, fasting can be enough of a stressor to bring about the troubles with weight loss and troubles with sleep.
The opposite effect of what you actually want.
And it has the potential to switch back and be a healthy stressor, but the root cause always needs to be strong, or the root body always needs to be strong enough to take on that stressor. When we communicate like this, it's healing for us, it's healing for future generations, it's empowering, it's freeing, and it's inspiring. We don't have to be stuck in bodies where our hormones are our enemy, and where pain and heavy flow and poor libido are the normal. They are very easy to address. They may not be super easy to fix in that they take time and they take commitment and they take some potentially big life changes, but they are things that we can manage, and when we do, we feel leaps and bounds better.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, what would you do if you had abundant energy, right? Like
You slept all the way through the night.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you feel like a whole new person, right?
Yeah,
if you
definitely.
are one of those people who don't sleep for the night.
I'm working with a client right now, and she has chronic insomnia, and she had a really great sleep, like literally one night of really good sleep where she said, like, I fell asleep, I did not wake up until the next morning. She said that has not happened to me in like 20 years.
Wow.
And she said the amount, like how good I felt the next day. She's like, holy shit, like, do some people feel this good all the time? And I was just like, my heart goes out to you.
You don't know
right?
what
Like,
you're missing until you actually like experience that little bit of like that light, right? Where it's like, oh, like
this is a
well,
good
I didn't
day.
clarity.
When people talk about like brain fog or like chronic headaches or like just these things that happen constantly, and that becomes their norm, right? And I talk to people all the time, especially with like kids, where like, let's talk about your poop, right? Like make sure like what's in the toilet, talk to your kids, because if you have a kid at like a young age, which we see often, who's constipated, who's not going regularly, then they're that teenager, that 30-year-old who thinks going to the washroom once or twice a week is normal. Right? And so then it's just, again, opening up conversations and having like, what is the norm? Where should we kind of be aiming towards? And I think that's so important, because we only know what we know, right? And so if we just need to talk more about everything.
Ask those awkward questions that potentially we wouldn't think to.
Exactly. Thank you so much
thank
for
you so
coming.
much.
Thanks
for having me.
Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Why don't you kind of tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, so I am
Make it close to the mic too.
Hello. I'm not the best at social media, but you can find me at West Valley Chiropractic, and we're online and easy to find, easy to schedule appointments through that website. I'm there evenings and weekends, so it works really great around busy people's schedules. And hopefully in the future I'll have a bit more of a social media presence.
So I have kind of one last question for you, and I know obviously like women and hormonal health, but what would be like, what is your ideal client? Like, who is it that like walks in your door that you get super jazzed about?
Such a good question. And it really has to do with hormones from beginning to end. So if I had a young teenage girl come in and say, I don't feel well, I have acne, I don't understand what's going on in my body, and I'm in lots of pain, that would be great. The starting place of education. One of my babies is fertility, so helping women start their families. I'm just really passionate about that. It's something that I've been through myself. So I love being a part of women and their fertility journeys. Awesome. And then postpartum as well, when it comes to thyroid deficiencies and mental health and exhaustion and hormone depletion. So there isn't really a hormone case that I don't want to take on. But for sure, those women that feel stuck and they're in hard places and they just don't know where to go next, and they think their hormones are really working against them. So if there's a place or a person where I can educate and help inspire, I'm a happy therapist.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Awesome.
Bye.